carried by a majority vote. So that means a 3-member committee, so 2 members can determine all of these appointments, which I think, and there's no mention about concurrence by city council, so I think that is inappropriate. Furthermore, I take a huge distinction between appointments that are internal to the process of the city, and external as liaisons and board appointments. And I think those are more deliberative and should have be chosen in a wider scope, maybe by the entire council or the mayor and council somehow in that manner, but not by 2 votes of a 3-board committee, of a 3-member committee. And furthermore, let's see, that's the term limits here. For example, I think here it talks about Community Action Board Committee, which I represent is actually Community Action Advisory Board. That happens to be a 3-year term, and there are only 3 elected members of that, and there is no distinction in the bylaws of that particular board as to how those positions are determined. So that would represent a larger scope that I think would need more discussion, as well as CTRAN and RTC, which are joint for Camas and Washougal, and any selection that is made by the Washougal City Council should have concurrence and agreement and voting authority by Camas City Council as well, because that rep actually is responsible for ensuring both cities get their voice heard.
Yes.
And I do have some policies I would like to see brought forward this year with regard to that, to make that clearer and fairer, but not tonight.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Just to clarify a few things that Councilwoman Costin had brought up. The first one is, I've got the CTRAN bylaws here, by the way. And the CTRAN bylaws specifically say that the appointment of that member shall be done by the governing bodies. It doesn't say by the appointment committee. So that would trump this amendment, what we're doing right now, because it would need to be confirmed by the governing bodies. You also look at some of the other things that you had said with a 3-year term. That in itself is not a here's the hard thing that we're dealing with in this, is that we've got an executive branch which is equal to the legislative branch. We are equal to the executive branch. Okay. I find it in a lot of ways kind of inappropriate for the executive branch to appoint a council member to something when we are equal. And so that would be like me turning around and saying, well, I want to appoint Sean to something. The mayor has his own appointments he makes that are outlined in the city code, and in the city council as well should have their appointments in which they make, which should be outlined in the city code. This is where we're running into these problems, because we did meet, we've got all these groups that we had added to the list. We met as an appointment committee, and then when this came back at our next meeting, 3 of the positions had changed from what we had discussed at our appointment committee meeting. And so
3 of the 4 that council are responsible for?
Well, the liaisons, 2 of the liaisons,
No.
and 1 of the board members.
No, the only items that you are currently responsible for and that the appointments committee are responsible for are the public works, the planning, the public safety, and the finance.
Right, but I didn't see in code where you're responsible for the liaisons either. So this is what we're trying to get on the books, of having an authority to be able to appoint these positions, and it seems appropriate that it would be the appointment committee unless otherwise.
Molly? Go
Yes.
lady first.
Just today, MRSC sent out a newsletter, and there was something that caught my eye, which is, when can a council in a mayor-council code city require confirmation of mayoral appointments? And it says the controlling statute for this issue is RCW 35A.12.090, where it says, "The mayor shall have the power of appointment and removal of all appointed officers and employees subject to any applicable law, rule, or regulation relating to civil service." So to me, and there is a little bit more here, but it does to me, and this just came out today. It's an old inquiry, but it came out in a newsletter today, which indicates to me that in a mayor-council form of government, the mayor does have the authority to make appointments.
I believe the officers, though, is talking about appointed officers, not elected. It doesn't say elected in that code. I looked at that today, actually.
Councilman Shoemaker.
Up to this point, I was agreeing with Councilwoman Coaston. I don't see the relevance of this particular statute because it talks about appointments within the civil service. I don't think that's relevant to appointments to council committees or to representations of the city outside. Don, please.
Well, I have the statute in front of me, and it talks about civil service in one aspect only. The power of appointment is for officers and employees, so then the question becomes, what's the definition of an officer? A liaison is not an officer, I don't think. In some circumstances, I think the planning commission might be considered an officer of the city.
I think an officer, by definition, is someone who has power and responsibility.
Yeah.
Responsibility and the power to execute those responsibilities.
Very, very briefly, Councilman Shoemaker, if you read very carefully the context of the mention of civil service, what it does is create an exemption of the mayor's power, because the mayor cannot fire or disappoint people who are protected by civil service law. And that's what's being talked about in that section. It's a limitation. It's not.
I didn't hear it that way, but I'd be glad to take a look at it.
I think
and
Councilman
study the matter.
is correct on that. It is an exemption that you can't, the mayor has no authority with regard to civil service. Otherwise, the authority is there for officers and employees.
Mr. English, a quick question for you in regards to procedures. And we do have a motion and a second on the floor to add the sections to the ordinance itself.
Right.
If we go through with that this evening, and if it is approved, when does that take effect
Wouldn't take effect till 5 days after its passage and posting.
and published?
Passage, posting, and publishing, right?
5 days or 10 days?
5.
Okay. I guess my question then to council and to Councilman Russell in regard to what I heard the original reason of this coming forward this evening and suspending the rules to do it is because of meetings that are taking place next week. Yet, I'm making an assumption, the meetings that you're referring to next week are the C-Tran and the RTC.
In the Chamber of Commerce,
So-
board meeting is next week.
I can't think of anything too earth-shattering there.
Just as a point, RTC is tomorrow.
Is tomorrow?
It's always the first Tuesday of
So
every month.
if we've got those items that, I mean, I'm clear, I don't disagree with you that we need a lot of discussion on this.